This is Tuesday, April the 13th. This is American history. Well, we know that Dwight Eisenhower is President of the United States. And Eisenhower is pretty much going to follow the same foreign policy with the Soviets that the United States had done under Truman. Eisenhower's Secretary of State is John Foster Dulles. And John Foster Dulles is going to be asked in an interview how far would the United States go to stop the Soviets. And Dulles said that the United States would go to the very brink of war to stop the Soviets. This began what we call brinksmanship. Brinksmanship is the idea that we must cut down on the number of troops because in a nuclear war they would not be needed, and that we should put our money into nuclear weapons and the delivery of these nuclear weapons to the Soviets. Now, please remember, in those days, you would have to put the bomb on a plane, and a plane would have to fly to the Soviet Union to drop them. This would mean that it would take a while, probably hours and hours. The idea of a nuclear war, or what experts called mutually assured destruction, was so great that the United States felt that it must have a large stockpile of nuclear weapons. Well, this meant that the Soviets are going to have a large stockpile of nuclear weapons. The idea is that if you see them coming, then you will release your bombers with our stockpile of weapons, and even though our country may be destroyed by these nuclear bombs, the other guy is going to be destroyed as well. Nothing will survive a nuclear war. The nation is going to enjoy prosperity. Called Eisenhower prosperity, it is one of the most prosperous times in American history. The number of unemployed is at an all-time low. The standard of income is going to become greater and greater. And Americans, because of their education due to the GI Bill of Rights, are going to have more money to buy better goods. One of the things that people want to buy is people want to buy homes. Now, homes in the city are unable to be built simply because the city has been built up. But people now, with their wealth, will purchase cars, and the cars will allow them to create suburbs. Now the cities are going to get bigger and bigger and start moving out in all directions. The only group that did not share in the prosperity in Eisenhower was farmers. Now, Eisenhower spoke of the concept of parity and price support. This is what Roosevelt had tried in the AAA. Now, we know that the AAA is going to be declared unconstitutional. Eisenhower will resurrect the AAA, and this time the courts will find it acceptable. In 1956, the Republicans and Democrats both have to nominate a candidate for president. Eisenhower is picked for a second term. The Democrats are going to go for Adlai Stevenson. Again, the blue states are Mr. Eisenhower. The red states are Mr. Stevenson. You can see that it is a great victory for President Eisenhower in both popular vote and in electoral college vote. Now, at the very end of Truman's term, the United States Supreme Court had passed down a decision called Brown versus the Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas. This was a court case that involved several other court cases. It was a challenge to Plessy versus Ferguson. Now, it basically said that everything had to be integrated. Schools, businesses, hotels, things like that. But it also said with all deliberate speed. Now, what exactly that meant, nobody really knew. Well, during Eisenhower's second term, the governor of Arkansas is going to challenge the idea of Brown versus the Board of Education, Topeka. He is going to deny entrance to several black youth who wanted to go to the all-white Little Rock Central High School. By doing so, Eisenhower said he was showing contempt for the courts. President Eisenhower is going to call the U.S. Army to protect the students. And for the next couple of years, the Army is going to protect the students from the wrath of many of the people in Little Rock. This video here talks about the Little Rock situation. At the same time, in Birmingham, Alabama, a NAACP leader named Rosa Parks is going to be arrested for not giving up her seat on an Alabama bus. Now, the idea was in Montgomery that if the bus was full, that the bus would pull over, blacks would get off, and whites would take their place. Rosa Parks refused. She is going to be arrested and thrown in jail. This begins what is called a Montgomery bus boycott. Here is a story about Rosa Parks. It was during the 1950s that the AFL, which began in the 1880s, and the CIO, which began in the 1930s, are going to merge into one large industrial union. But as these unions merge, one union in particular is going to stand out. The Teamsters. The Teamsters are those people who drive trucks. Now, this is their leader, Jimmy Hoffa. And Jimmy Hoffa was accused of being a person who is being manipulated by organized crime. The Teamsters are going to loan a great deal of money to organized crime figures so they can build up Las Vegas. At the same time, the Soviet Union has a new leader. Now, Stalin had died in 1953, and after a couple of years, Nikita Khrushchev is going to be appointed the leader of the Soviet Union. Now, Khrushchev is going to propose a goodwill mission to the United States. He will be given a tour of the United States by Vice President Richard Nixon. It is during this tour that Khrushchev is going to talk about the Soviet Union technology and how it was better, how the U.S. schools were inferior to the Soviet schools. Now, almost immediately after returning to the Soviet Union, the Soviets are going to launch Sputnik. Now, Sputnik is a satellite. By today's standards, it's extremely primitive. But the fact that the Soviets have a missile that can launch a satellite into outer space, the United States military becomes quite concerned. Because if we could put a nuclear weapon on top of a missile, that could get the nuclear weapon to the United States sooner than airplanes. And of course, the United States does not have a missile that can do this. Thus begins the space race. Now, the idea is that we want to put satellites into outer space like the Soviets, but you also realize this allows the United States to put missiles on targets as well. Here is a quick video about the impact of Sputnik on the United States. It was during the Eisenhower administration that the National Aeronautics and Space Administration will begin. The chief goal of NASA is to teach more math, to teach more science to our students. Colleges are encouraged to begin to work with the federal government in an attempt to pass up the Soviet Union. High schools are required for the students to have more math, have more science to graduate. Well, I think this would probably be a pretty good time for us to quit. We will finish up this lesson tomorrow. Also tomorrow we're going to have a walkout worksheet, and then we will begin the lessons that begin with Kennedy and Johnson. Now, I remind you that your project is getting closer and closer to being due.